a great fireside chat. Enjoy.
Have we got a...
Tricky.
Thank you. Just get the zap up. Hey!
Ta-da!
Works. So it's lovely to be here today. This is the highlight of my week. Actually, I'm planning to end the week, hopefully in a bar in Malaga, eating prawns and drinking rosé. But without a doubt, this is the highlight. This is the highlight because it's great to be here with so many of you talking about the future of our practice. But also, I get to spend half an hour with a client, Debbie Zaman, talking about very practically the implementation of AI within workflow, within an agency context. And there are lessons for any communication function in the conversation we're going to have. So Debbie is the founder and CEO of an employee-owned B2B agency. The employee-owned bit's important, as you'll come to learn, called With. And I helped her over 6 months with training and innovation around AI. We formatted this as a conversation because we're really going to tell the story of what we did in the project over 6 months. So, Debbie, I'll start. The first point is Anne clearly showed that AI shows up as a technology, but actually it's a much bigger cultural and societal issue, I think, than anything else. We described this in the pitch as a cultural change project. Why do you think it was important to address the mindset of the team at With, first of all?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as for most agencies, the adoption of AI in our business is a potentially seismic change to how we do business. But we already do a lot of training, we already ask a lot of our team. So just kind of pushing it at them and saying this is what you need to learn was never going to be the ideal way round things. So really understanding how they could, and there's a lot of cultural context, as you said, a lot of stuff out there that they're reading, good and bad. And so it had to land in that context and be sensitive to that context. So understanding what they needed from it to do a better job, what they could see the opportunities were for them in doing better work for clients was a really important starting point, and approaching it with that growth mindset, being aware of what they thought could go wrong, but where the opportunities lay as well. And I think, you touched on this just now, but we're an employee-owned business. So we are a very, very, as the name With suggests, we're a very collaborative business. So really kind of making sure that we understood where their heads were at before we even began this was really important. And for us, one example of that was that the project we did with you, we decided, right, we're going to focus on one tool. We're going to do, to start with, we're going to do one thing really well, and we're not just going to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. So yeah, that was always a super important starting point for us. You've done a lot of AI training with a lot of different communications organisations, in-house and agencies. What did you see for us that how that impacted adoption and learning to kind of take that approach?
So I think there's a very natural human reaction to technology, and it shows up in the hype cycles. You'll get a bunch of people, typically 15 to 20% of an organisation, that will lean into new technology and they'll adopt it. Most people will be really scared of it, and AI does create a whole load of existential risk for society in terms of economics, in terms of employment. The fear about jobs is very, very real, and please do not underestimate that. And so you find actually the hype cycle for AI is a lot slower than we'd like to believe on LinkedIn. If you go onto LinkedIn, everyone's talking about adoption and actually within a team context, especially within a large team, it's very, very different. So we started the project with an exercise to address mindset and to ensure we came at this from a solution focus. So there was it wasn't possible to have wrong answers. We created an emotionally safe environment where people could turn up every week, and we did training for 16 weeks, 4 months. Turn up every week and share the stories of what worked and what didn't. And a lot more works, a lot more fails, as Ant suggests, than actually works. And that was really, really important because something after 2 or 3 weeks of actual training, something really important happened, and we started to have a group collaboration. And we worked hard, and we'll talk about this, on the learning design and how that worked for this. But it was important that it wasn't didactic. It wasn't, an instructor or CEO of an organisation leading a team. It was a team collaborative coming together and learning. And that was only enabled by creating a safe environment where people could fail. I think. AI is a strategic issue for organisations. It often turns up, though, in the IT department, rolled out as Microsoft Copilot, God forbid, or some variant of that. Why was it so important to you strategically as a leader to bring your embed AI within your team?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think we are a smaller company. I love sitting and listening to Golin sessions in this kind of thing, but we are not Golin. We are a £2 million business. We're a £2 million business, and so that's a different beast, right? But it's really important for us as a business. A large swathe of our clients are technology clients. So, as a leader of a technology PR business, absolutely essential that I'm kind of part of that conversation. We have clients in really highly regulated spaces, be that healthcare, financial services. So again, being involved as a leader in that to make sure that ultimately clients feel reassured. But as part of an employee-owned organisation, right, we had to approach this top to bottom. The other thing is, and I think this is true of most people in comms, I still love learning. I definitely wanted to be a part of this from a personal development perspective. That was really important to me. And I think, as I said, we already do a lot of training, continuous best practice, etc. And I needed to make sure that I had a role in understanding how this training and how the adoption of this technology was going to fit into all the other things that we do and fit in effectively to help us do better work. But also, we want to bring our clients with us on this AI journey. We don't want to AI at them, we want to AI with them. And so again, I think from a client perspective, it's really important for us that there was visibility for the entire senior team across the project. Again, from your perspective of doing this with all sorts of different organisations of different sizes, what do you think the involvement of leadership in the adoption of AI has by way of impact? What difference does it make?
I think it's absolutely fundamental. And it's notable where it's a notable success factor in driving high performance if you don't have the involvement of the leadership within the organisation. And actually it's more than that they are actively involved in what is a change management project. It's not going to work. And I say it flippantly, but the notion of IT rolling out Microsoft Copilot will just not work. It will become another enterprise tool along the many enterprise tools that we have. I think because AI shows up as a shiny new tool though, and actually is a societal and cultural issue, leadership has to make that bridge if you're going to get the strategic value from it. And the first thing you have to do, and we spent a month doing this, is figure out what your governance is going to be. What are the rules of the road? Where are we going to go and where we're not going to go? That has to be led by by leadership, but also you have to involve everyone and every level in that. And then there's a competency perspective. Where are you going to use AI? Where you're not going to use AI? That's again a leadership and at least a management issue, and that has to be co-created as well. And then finally, it has to be embedded within the workflow through training. We did a 4-month training exercise, and without any one of those, if any one of those three things was missing, I don't think we would have had the success we were. And it's a leadership issue, it's a management issue more than anything else.
For sure.
Undoubtedly. There's a practical reality, though, of the burden that places on a leader. And with many comms leaders and in-house team leaders here today, how do you find the time to set aside, what is effectively a 6-month change project within, I've described it as changing the wheels while the train's going.
Yeah, true. Well, again, we didn't decide to do it overnight. You and I were having conversations for a couple of months. Then we planned ahead, right? And I think that, and also it wasn't a burden, obviously. It was fabulous, and seeing the team's response to it was also, something that makes it completely worthwhile. I think that timeline was really realistic, though, because we did a month worth of listening, understanding where their heads are at, where their competencies were at, where their concerns were at, where their capabilities were at. And then we did a month of putting a really responsive training plan together around that listening, and really led by the services that we deliver day to day rather than the tool. So really understanding what it is, what are the most common or the most valuable services, we looked at both, that the team are delivering that AI can support with, and we really dug into that, which meant that over the course of the then weekly training for 4 months, 16 sessions together, we were able to repeat some things, how you use ChatGPT for us, in different services that you deliver may come up more than, that particular way of using the tool may come up more than once. But again, that reinforcement has been really, really helpful in it sticking with everybody. The frequency of those sessions being weekly, absolutely vital for it sticking, for me as much as for anybody else. To be coming back to the tool, to be workshopping it every single week, that made a huge difference. And it also allowed us to adapt. We could understand, a new development in the tool, we could weave that in pretty quickly. If we had done a session on a particular technique, and it was unlocking some issues, we could come back to it the following week, and we could adapt that schedule because we had so many sessions that we could play with effectively. We were able to really tailor it to the needs of the team. And I think for that, yes, it was time intensive, but it's the net output of that has been, and the impact of that has been fantastic. You've touched on this already. You talk a lot about the kind of social contract with LLMs and AI, and that being a potentially limiting factor on adoption. Possibly the preconceptions we have, the concerns that we have. And you were really insistent that we start with that listening exercise, which was absolutely crucial, and look at that governance piece that you've talked about. Why?
So it's really interesting. So in public relations, by its very nature, in corporate communications, we're dealing with the relationship perspective of the organisation. LLMs come in and intermediate that, or disintermediate that relationship as another form of technology. And we're dealing with this massive stakeholder environment, and every different stakeholder has a different perspective in a team, let alone amongst clients or the media. And we're in that really funny place at the moment where there's this race to adopt AI, but God forbid you dare post something on LinkedIn that looks like it's been generated down by AI, and you will get burned down. And that shows the real social complexity of using AI. And to get around that, to manage that, a team has to develop its own governance. So you have to decide, like we did with social media 10 or 15 years ago, okay, what are the rules of the road? What are the boundaries? Where are we not going to use it? Where are we going to use it? And you have to train on that. Now, we did multiple listening exercises with the team at different levels. And we also involved clients as part of that. And then that led to a governance document. And from there, we developed competency. And I think, and then the training, I think that's absolutely fundamental, because it gives you a point of truth within the agency and a defensible position. And it can be challenged, and it can be contested, and it will be as an ongoing basis. This is a living, breathing, societal, cultural issue as tools change and as attitudes change, but it's really important to start there. But to that point, Debbie, on the ick we feel when we see a post, someone dares use an M dash on a LinkedIn post. I think content is the line within corporate communications and public relations. It's the line about where we go and where we don't go with AI. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because I think there's probably a conversation even before you get to the content, yes or no conversation around transparency. And I think for us, we operate as a very kind of transparent, honest business. And so that transparency on the back of the governance document, there's a central part in our governance document about what we will and what we won't use AI for. And the governance document was shared with all of our clients. They all had the option to opt out, should they want to. And that transparency on how we would use AI covered content. And for us at the moment, we do not use AI to write content. We can use it to help inform the context, and we were hearing how important context is earlier. But we do not use it to write content. We use AI checkers on our own content, on content that we might be receiving as well. So I think that transparency piece for us across all of it, not just content, was really important, and the governance framework as a kind of framework to share with clients on what we were doing there was really important. And for us, the reason that we don't use AI for content is we have a real commitment as an agency around the energetic language that we use. That came up an awful lot in training. We have a 3-line whip on not using I'm delighted, I'm thrilled, I'm pleased, I'm proud to open a quote. And if you ask AI, as I'm sure you all know, to write you a quote, it's going to start like that because that's what it sees out there. And we want language that's going to jump off the page and be very clearly not AI and sound very human and be really, really readable. So for us, that was one of the transparent points. It may change in years to come, as you say, we may adopt and adapt, but that's where we stood for the moment, and that's something that our clients have responded really, really well to. So let's talk about how a little bit. We had that listening exercise, we did the governance document, we got our clients' buy-in. How did you take us from governance to that weekly schedule of 4 months of training?
Yeah, so there's an intermediate step, which is competence, and developing a competence framework within the agency context, and that emerges through listening exercises, understanding what the workflow is of the communication team, or in this case the agency, and then how you break down and teach against that. So embed AI within that workflow. And so there was this exercise where we developed this competence framework, and we decided, right, this is what we're going to train against. Actually, as the tools developed during the 6-month period of the project, we actually modified that as we went. But that competence framework was key, because that gave us, if you like, the signpost to train against. The actual training itself, and I learned quite a lot from you during this, because you're a challenging practitioner and client, in the sense of critical thinking.
In a really good way.
In a good way,
yeah.
But it would be very easy, and it is very easy to rock up and do an hour of a webinar, but no one's going to learn from that.
Yeah.
And so this is a very practical application, and that has to be reflected in learning. So we developed this teaching format where I would lead with a provocation, do a demonstration, and then the team would go and do the same and challenge that. And along the way, we'd have various times for them to feed back and about what they'd done, what had worked, and what hadn't, and as much didn't work as did. And that built a really, really constructive environment and safe environment, crucially, for learning, where we all moved along at the same time. That's what I mean by challenging, because you absolutely cannot learn this stuff by following YouTube or watching LinkedIn webinars. You need to do, and you need to be sat with someone who has an awareness of the limitations and the opportunities of the tools. Yeah. So I learned quite a lot about teaching design during that, and I'm grateful for that. Okay. It did take us a couple of weeks to iterate that. From your perspective and we went through the session on a Monday. Well, on a Monday we'd go through the design, and on a Wednesday we'd actually deliver it. Talk about that for your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think you that collaboration between us was really important, because as the business leader, I know what services we're delivering. I had a feeling of where AI could plug in, and I had to be the kind of champion and guardian of that, and you were the champion and guardian of the tool and what it could do and any challenges around it. And so it was a real collaboration to be able to, as you said, competency first, client service first, tool second, but a collaboration as to really where they can help, the tool can help our business specifically. So it was really, really focused on that. And I think that format familiarity was absolutely vital. So the team knew each Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock, this is what was happening. You'd set it out with what they were going to learn this week, show them what's possible, show them what's good, do some of that stuff live so they can follow you doing the process. Explain why it's good for the business, explain why it's valuable, explain what clients are going to get out of it, what the team's going to get out of it as well, explain what could go wrong. Everybody have a go, and then they took it away as homework as well. And I have to really commend my team as well, because they lent into this full force. There was no kind of, it's 10 a.m. on a Wednesday, eye roll, or they really lent into it. And they did every week take it away and practice and use it and bring what they'd learned back to the next session for that collective learning. So it really was incremental week on week. So I think that process and that shared learning was, an absolutely crucial part of the success.
Yeah, and ultimately it embedded it within practice to the point where we are today. So we started talking in November, December, I think it was last year. We spent January doing the listening exercise, developing the governance. February we worked on the competency framework, and then we had these 4 months of training. We're now 3 months on. Where have we landed? Where are the team using it? What are they, we're at an AMEC conference. What's the effectiveness and what's the efficiency that we've seen?
It's absolutely brilliant, I have to say. And again, full credit to the team. We have so far had full client adoption. Nobody has opted out. We've had some really interesting engagements with clients as we shared the governance framework as well, to kind of understand what we were doing, and clients that really want to lean in and understand what we've learned as well. We have developed bespoke GPTs for every client. We're on a paid tool, so it's all enterprise grade security and doesn't train the model, crucially. So for some clients, we have built a point of view library. So all of the published points of view that they've developed from within the business, centralise those to fuel newsjacking responses. Again, the AI doesn't write those for us, but it will pull together what the perspective might be. And so for one client, we've had a 7-fold increase in the success of our newsjacking, for example. We're doing a lot of work, as you could imagine, as we've got clients in the technology space, on helping clients manage their AI messaging. What are they going to say about their tools, their stack, etc., publicly, and using our trained GPTs to understand the landscape of their competitors and what their competitors are saying. We've synthesized huge amounts of information, and clients have, had those real, wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for doing that. And one of the really interesting things we've done is build synthetic audiences. Again, in B2B tech, you can get very, very specialized audiences, hyper-targeted audiences. And so we've built synthetic audiences. It was, we did probably 2 or 3 sessions in the training on that, to be able to test our content against, to be able to test messaging against, to be able to test channel selection against. And that's been really helpful, and clients are just super grateful for that, because it's a real advantage point. We did a little LinkedIn post with some of the team talking about how they use it, because they're all using it in different ways, and it continues to iterate. We check our governance framework. We have 2 AI guardians within the business now who are our champions. We have a fortnightly AI newsletter. which we're thinking about starting to publish because the AI Guardians do an amazing job of it. It's super interesting. And we review our governance framework every 3 months. The first 3 months, nothing changed on it, which may not be too surprising. There's probably some things that we're going to update this time round. I think kind of full team and client adoption would be that in a nutshell.
What a great piece of storytelling. Thank you very much. Our final point, Jenna asked us to share a favourite point. I got really grumpy about this and said, actually, this isn't the point. The point is we should be teaching people how to create prompts and please use structured forms of prompts because then they become social assets. But you go.
Yeah, and I think, when we were looking to work with a training provider, we had lots of people go, and we will build you a prompt library and we will approach it this way, and it seemed very formulaic. And actually, yes, we looked at how to write great prompts. Yes, we will spot an article in Fast Company on how to do those things better. But actually this really tailored approach to, well, why? Why do you need to ask it to do something? What is it that you're trying to get out of it ultimately? That slightly more holistic approach to how we can use AI tools within the business was much more important and ultimately much more valuable for our business. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. We have one question, if
We've
you
got a
don't
question.
mind. Yeah,
Okay.
we have one question that we will allow time for. What's the biggest cultural barrier to AI adoption in your team or organization?
Yeah, I think this would probably be reflected across a lot of agencies, but in a smaller business with 15 people, it's probably more obvious that people are really scared of doing something wrong and getting exposed, of doing something wrong. And I think so creating that safe place for them to experiment, to kind of talk really openly about what might go wrong, about what wrong looks like, about how to avoid wrong, etc., and to bring clients with us on that journey was really important. But yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest cultural challenge.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I think that's systemic throughout comms, right? They want to succeed, they want to excel, and they're worried about that failure, the perceived failure, being short-sighted and not recognizing all the learnings that come from that and then the growth that accelerates that from. So it's really amazing. Thank you so much for sharing the case study. Big round of applause again for Stephen and for Debbie.